Hey Wolfpack, I unfortunately ran into an issue with the online dating stories, so I will be uploading the second most upvoted, which was Cannibal stories. I hope you all are doing well in quarantine, so listen to these stories to get your mind off the media. With that said, whether you're sitting around a campfire, on the night shift, or even laying in bed, let my voice soothe your nightmares. A single-engine private plane skimming low over the Alaskan wilderness, glacial waters as clear as a polished mirror, reflecting the vast primordial forests and savage peaks which loom above us, a testament to the stoic grandeur of an Earth which existed long before humanity and will continue to endure long after the footnote of our existence has been forgotten. For one glorious moment, it feels as though the world was created just for us. But that was before the engine stalled mid-flight, before the violent plummet and the mercy of a deaf god, before the ground accelerating towards us, all happening much too fast to regain altitude before the crash. An explosion so loud it was silent, light so bright I saw nothing. Everything lurching so bad it felt like my soul must have been ripped clean from my body. I wish I had died the second we hit the ground. I wish my husband had too, but he lingered in that broke body until nightfall. Our hands had never clasped so tightly as when we sealed together with his blood, and no words were as precious as those escaping between his shallow breaths. "Promise me that you'll survive," he said. "Whatever it takes." I wasn't in much better condition than him. One of my legs was broken, several ribs had snapped, and 3 of my fingers were still clinging to the bottom of my seat, where I'd braced for the crash, now about a dozen feet away. I didn't expect to last the night, but I still made that promise. I'd like to think that hope gave me small comfort before his eyes closed for the last time. After that came the war between slow starvation and my desperate hope of being saved. A hungry animal could easily find me first, though, lured by the scent of charred flesh and fresh blood which teased my nostrils. But there was another war going on below the surface, my human dignity against my will to survive. I lasted almost 4 days before I took the first bite, just a mouthful, holding the strip of his skin in my mouth, wetting my parched throat with his blood. By the end of the week, I'd become more methodical, stripping the flesh clean to roast, cracking the bones for their marrow, wasting nothing. By the end of 2 weeks, there was nothing left of my husband. I'd given up on ever being rescued, instead started the long walk back towards civilization. I was amazed at how quickly my leg had healed, and as I trekked, I felt myself filled with a restless vitality which I could only attribute to my will to live. I barely slept at night, barely rested during the day. It's almost as if I'd spent my entire life being sick, but I'd gotten so used to the feeling that I thought that's how everyone is supposed to feel. I can tell you right now that life is a lie. Your blood is not supposed to pass sluggish and unnoticed through your veins. It's power dormant. You should feel the electricity of your flexing muscles, each explosive fiber primed to your will. Those pristine wildernesses were not where I had been banished to die. It's where I came to be alive. I don't know how long I traveled in such a state, falling into a trance from my single-minded determination. I think my husband's spirit must have been guiding me through it, because I found sudden understanding in navigating from the stars, just like he learned from the Navy. Eventually, I found what I was looking for, a couple of campers fresh from the big city. I was so relieved at hearing another human voice through the trees that I surged forward like a wild thing. All my pain and sacrifice had been building to this moment. Elegant French words, a woman's laughter, a way home. This is what I'd kept myself alive for. But when I saw them, him panting and sweating to move his grotesque belly, her screaming and carrying on as though I was less than human, well, it just goes to show you that sometimes you need to take a step back in order to see things clearly. After everything I'd been through, I couldn't feel anything but pity and disgust for these torpid creatures. willing victims of what their artificial life had deformed them into. The husband was bigger, but the wife tasted better, cleaner. I lived more vibrantly in the next few nights, feasting and regaining my strength from their unused bodies than all the years they'd wasted on being half alive. I wasn't only getting stronger either. I started catching my thoughts slipping in and out of French. I thought my husband had been guiding me through the woods, but now it seemed more appropriate to say that I had consumed some aspect of him, just as I had done with the French couple. I was hungrier than ever, gnawing, incessant hunger almost as soon as I'd finished, like my stomach threatened to digest itself if it didn't get more. I tried eating some of the trail mix and granola bars in their packs, but it tasted so much like sawdust and dirt. Even the beef jerky tasted like cardboard, although that's not unusual by itself. Human meat. And it was obvious that the more I ate, the more I needed it. The prospect of returning to my frail old self, unbearable. But the idea of living in the woods, biding my time in agonizing solitude while waiting for my next chance meal, I don't think that's any better. Unless, of course, I go back to my old life without giving up what I need to survive. And such easy targets, there at the kindergarten where I used to teach. I didn't even waste time stopping at a hospital. My wounds had mended on their own, all but the missing fingers. I only stopped off at home long enough for a shower and some new clothes before heading back to the school. Surrounded by a sea of little shaggy heads, not even reaching my waist, I could almost taste them. The other teachers were shocked to hear what happened, of course. Their version was lighter on the details, but despite their generous offers to help, I insisted that I wanted to be back in the classroom as soon as possible. "See, guys, I told you she wasn't dead." That was Roddick. He likes to finger paint. I hope it doesn't have a bad flavor. "What happened to your hand? Ew, gross, you're gross." I'd be lying if I said this was the first time I'd contemplated Tiffany's horrible demise. "You don't have to come back. We were having fun without you too." "Oh, don't worry." I squatted down to Sandy's level. "Having me around will be even more exciting. Now take these and hand one out to everyone in the class. I may be hungry, but I'm not an idiot. I'd never be able to take more than 1 or 2 children before causing such a scene that it became impossible to continue." "What's she handing out? What is it? Let me see!" Tiffany shouted. "It's a permission slip," I told her. "We're going on a field trip. You, me, the whole class. We're going camping." It's not just the taste that makes children special, it's their innocence. And if I ever want to start over and live a normal life, then I'm gonna need to eat until I'm innocent again too. There's a legend about the curve outside of town. It started back in the 1960s, when a group of teenagers vanished on the road, the car's headlights still cutting into the darkness, the doors left open to the cold wind. But no teenagers. The police never found them, never found so much as a shred of evidence as to what happened to them. Naturally, this led to the legend of the cannibals in the curve. How it happened, according to our schoolmates, was that the kids became victim to a group of flesh-eaters that inhabited the woods near the curve. The cannibals wore the teenagers' flesh and clothes like a costume, cutting out eye holes in their mouths in the shape of wide smiles, then stitching them back together with thick black thread. Kids repeated this to me and Peter as we walked home from school. I can still hear them chanting, "The cannibals in the curve! Watch out for the cannibals in the curve!" Peter lived down the road from me, and we spent our childhoods and teenage years together. He was a tall, broad-shouldered dude with a lot of hair. Meanwhile, I was short and scrawny. He was always defending me, growing up, even though he was more like a gentle giant than anything else. Years passed and we grew up. Peter and I, we remained in contact, but real life got in the way, and we didn't get to see one another as much as either of us would have liked. When his sister Kayla disappeared, there was nothing else I could do but meet up with my longtime best friend. He invited me over to his house, which was a small apartment on Sparrow Street at the time. It was cramped with items from his travels. I hadn't really been expecting it to look the way it did. We sat down on his sofa and he offered me a beverage. I declined, but he popped the top off a beer and began weaving his tale. "The last time I saw her," he said, "she was happy. That's what makes this so hard, man. She was really happy, and about to get married. God, Rob is a mess. And she's just gone." I waited, unsure of what to say. He continued, And I can't help but think of that damned road. The cannibals in the curve, Harvey. The cannibals in the curve. No, I said. There's no way. I mean, that was just a story. It was made up by kids, Pete. I don't understand, Peter said, his drink abandoned on the coffee table. He cupped his forehead with one hand as if he had a headache. Her doors were open. Her lights were on. Just like the legends. The police are looking. The police aren't doing shit. They're sitting around eating donuts and drinking coffee, Harvey. Just like the legends. Would it make you feel better if, you and I went looking for her? The look in his eyes told me all I needed to know. We gathered up our equipment, flashlights, and headed for the curve. It was a cold, clear autumn evening. Wind-swept leaves scattered across the ground, crunching beneath our feet as we walked. We had 2 goals in mind. The first was to find Kayla. The second was to get out of there. That was when we saw her, Kayla, standing among the trees, her cropped blonde hair pulled by the wind. She looked just like the last time Peter had seen her, but there was something wrong. Like it wasn't her, but it wasn't at the same time. Then she was running. We took off after her, calling her name, but she seemed to run faster and faster with each passing minute. It would take us forever to catch up with her. I decided and slowed to a halt. I turned to Peter, who was breathing heavily and bent over, trying to catch his breath. Pete, I said, I don't think, whatever that is, I don't think it's your sister. What are you talking about? It looks just like her. But something isn't right. We made it this far. We're not leaving without Kayla. And I wasn't leaving without Peter. Deeper into the woods we went, shouting her name to the wind. In the distance, we heard laughter. Peter picked up the pace. I lagged behind, exhausted by the chase. When it became clear he wasn't going to wait for me, I followed his lead and started jogging toward the sound. I found him crouched next to a boulder, hidden in its shadow. The laughter was louder. I didn't speak at the time. There was a clearing in the woods. There was a house in that clearing. Inside the house was a group of people, all laughing like they were seeing the funniest thing on the planet. I started to say something to Peter, but his eyes were squeezed shut, and he was biting his lips so hard it started to bleed. I took matters into my own hands. Approaching the house, I peered through the window and saw a single person. It was Kayla. She reached for something on her back, a shining silver zipper, and unzipped it, shedding her skin and clothing like a snake. I realized what was happening. I realized it wasn't Kayla. I realized it was someone else. Someone who had inevitably sharp teeth and a mask made from her face, with eye holes cut out where her pretty green eyes had been. Most of all, I realized that sometimes, just sometimes, legends happen to be true. I'm writing this to you in desperate need for help. I thought everything was going to be okay, but I was so wrong. It all started 1 month ago. You see, I used to live in an orphanage called the Wings of the Light, which was something I never quite understood as a child because the light was nowhere to be seen. We prayed to God every day, not because they wanted us to, but because we needed to. We needed compassion and safety, something we never found on the wood floors of the orphanage. Sleeping on the cold floor of a crowded room wasn't the worst thing, though. Screams, cries, bruises, cuts, needles, ugly green substances injected into our bodies, and frowning nuns who were ready to lock us in the basement just for their own entertainment, who were so happy to listen to our horrible screams and the sound of us kicking, punching, and scratching the cold thick walls in desperate need for freedom. Speaking from the position that I am right now, I miss it. All of it. A few days before the 15th of October, a man showed up at the orphanage. All of the children in desperate need of a decent shelter were watching him through the keyhole. He was wandering in the halls in his black suit with a smirk on his face before he was called to the director's office, an evil woman we often used to call the Devil's Wife. As the children were wondering if the mysterious man was going to take one of them home, I sat down in the corner of the room, knees close to my chest with a strange feeling in my stomach. The floor felt colder and colder as the steps were heard from the hall. With a quick and harsh movement, the door opened. One of the nuns was standing there with a wide grin on her face. Her hands were shaking. "Lisa, come with me." Her voice came out dry and empty. I stopped functioning when I heard my name. My body started trembling like I was thrown against a wall, and then fell into a frozen ocean. Trying to ignore the obvious anxiety rushing through my veins, I got up and followed the nun. My breathing got heavier and heavier with every step that I took. Was she going to lock me in the basement? Was my blood going to be drowned in those disgusting green substances again? To be fair, I didn't even know if I wanted an answer. The nun opened the door to the office, and I got in with shy steps, watching the floor, terrified of lifting my head up. The room was dark, and it smelled like old books and candles. Something else I could smell was bleach. At first, I thought they washed the floor. I wish it was that. "Girl," the Devil's Wife called me, her voice sounding like a broken tape. As I heard the appellative, I lifted my sight and looked in front of me. There he was, the man with the wide grin. It may be wrong to say it, but he looked heavenly. Black hair and blue eyes, pale skin and rosy lips. Something about him made me feel safe and secure like a newborn baby in his mother's arms. "You must be Lisa. It's nice to meet you," he said, as he took my hand and shaked it with excitement. His hands were soft, and my nose was once again filled with the unmistakable scent of bleach. His smirk never left his face. It was like he was painted, made, not born. They informed me he was going to adopt me, and on the 15th of October, I was going to get out of there. I didn't ask too many questions. He was kind to me, and at that moment, anything seemed better than the orphanage. When the day came, he walked me to his car and opened the door for me, the same smirk on his lips. The ride to his house was quiet, just a few questions asked now and then about how I was feeling and what I wanted for lunch. Small things that I was never asked as a child, but it felt good knowing that somebody finally cared for me, even if it was a total stranger. After a 2-hour ride, we arrived at this house in the middle of the forest. It was a small one. It seemed cozy despite the mess around it. As I got out of the car, I could feel the smell of bleach melted into the grass. The tall man took my hand and led me into the house. It was old-fashioned, but warm, and it was all I needed. I looked at him with a shy smile on my lips, and he stared back at me with the same old smirk, his eyes burning holes in my face. "I'm going to check on your dorm to see if everything is prepared." I nodded slowly, not asking any questions. As he got upstairs, I made my way to the living room. I was admiring all the sparkling decorations, taking every little detail into my memory when something or someone caught my eye. A boy about my age was lying under the table covered in a black coat. His eyes were wide open, and his scent made its way to my nose. Bleach. He was murmuring something that I didn't quite understand. Prayers? "Are you okay?" I asked as I was getting closer. "He's going to get you too, you know? He already did." His words came out raspy and dry. His freckles covered his porcelain skin, and the makeup he was wearing made his eyes seem so big. He looked like a broken doll. I couldn't say another word because the old man already came. He led me to my room with the same signature grin, placing his hand on my back. My new dorm was bright pink, with a lot of toys, makeup, and dresses. He pointed to another white door, which seemed like the bathroom. He closed the door behind me, leaving me all alone without a word. As I entered the bathroom, I found myself drowning in an unmistakable scent of bleach. Full bottles were standing on the cold floor. On each and every bottle, sticky notes were attached to them, baptized for purification. I poured all of it into the bathtub, not wasting a drop. My old dress fell to the floor, and I felt my body floating on a cloud. Pure. Despite the intoxicating smell, I felt better. I felt alive. I put on the most beautiful pink dress I found, and as another note that was sticky to the mirror said, "Get ready," I did. I had no idea how to do my makeup, but somehow I managed to. My body was no longer dirty and weak, and for the first time in a long time, I felt empowered. As I was lost deep in my thoughts, I heard a bell ring. I guess it was a signal for me to go downstairs. I walked on every step as delicate as I could, feeling every inch of the cold floor. He was in the dining room, sitting at a wooden table, smiling as always. Telling by the way he looked at me, he wanted me to sit down, so I did. "I hope you like the meat," he said, really excited, and I knew there was something wrong about the way he said it. Just as I started wondering where the other boy was, the old man started hungrily eating his food. "You just met him. He was really nice, but he tastes nicer." I felt my heart beating in my throat. What is he talking about? Did he really? "You know, I haven't had some female meat in a long time. I'm really glad you're here," he said, with a small laugh that made my hair raise. "It's been a month. I know it's going to happen at some point or another. If someone reads this, please stay away from him. Every day is the same. Fearing that some other child is going to enter that door. That's when I know my end will come. Is this really how I'm going to die?" Thanks for watching, Wolfpack. If you want to submit your story, my email and subreddit will be in the description below. And also, if you're not subscribed, please do if you want. And don't forget to like and comment as well. Have beautiful nightmares. And I will see you next time.